Former President of the United States, Donald Trump, is expected to be arrested here within the next 48 to 72 hours. Yes, you heard me right. Donald Trump is expected to be arrested within hours. If Trump is arrested, there could be massive, and I mean absolutely massive, protests around the United States of America. If that, we'll see if things remain peaceful or if they got rough, or, there's a lot of moving dynamics in regards to this. But obviously this is a pretty shocking event. I would call it that. In the stock market, we call these sorts of events like a black swan event, when something happens so big that you were not expecting and it shakes the markets up in a huge way. And so this is not just a small thing. This is a pretty major thing here. My 2 cents on is Trump actually going to have to do any time for his situation? My personal opinion is, and we'll hear what they have to say here on Fox News, my opinion is probably not. I'll just be completely honest. Whether an arrest actually happens, maybe that's definitely a possibility, but there's a big difference between an arrest and actually having to go away and do time for something like that. And I think, honestly, with Trump and his obviously legal team there, I think there's a fairly low probability, we'll call it that actually was to happen. But nonetheless, it's a dramatic thing for, obviously the United States to go through here. And obviously it's a dramatic thing for the market to go through, because we don't know what's actually going to happen here and the potential chaos or not chaos this could cause, because this is not just any president. Let's be honest. This is not just any president that's getting arrested. The possibilities of arrest sound very serious and very possible. The chances Trump would actually have to go away, I think, is much more slim. But for the market, for the stock market specifically, I think it's really the arrest that's the huge deal. And if that happens, the potential protests, does anything get violent? Does it not get violent? Is everything peaceful? Is there chaos? That's a whole can of worms that we don't know as of right now, but we're going to see within the next 48 to 72 hours if it actually happens. So, recession, okay? We've been hearing about recession since about December of 2021. And as 2022 ticked along, you heard more and more about recession. And we actually saw Google Trends go to the highest that we have seen in the history of Google Trends for the term recession, right? And here we are now, only a week and a half away from April of 2023, still hearing about recession. I want to tell you what I'm seeing in the real world, as somebody that went to the real world, let's call it, and left the internet universe yesterday, and just kind of show you what I saw personally out there, okay? And then I want to share some perspective around this recession talk, because the can kind of keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed, and we got to talk about that, okay? Yesterday, I went to a ton of different places, okay? Had some family in town. They wanted to go to a bunch of different places. So one of the places they wanted to go was the Planet, okay? So got to go to the Planet. I got to say, I haven't seen the Planet that busy in a long time, okay? In a long time. That place was out of control yesterday. I was like, holy smokes, is this back to the stimulus money days? I hadn't seen it that busy since probably the 2021 days of stimulus money and whatnot. Went to a taco place to get food. And that place was a zoo. It's called the Taco Stand, by the way. Good food there. It's a place here in Vegas, right? Probably 5 minutes from the Strip or so. That place was like a line out the place. I was like, holy smokes, this is no joke, okay? Then I drove the entire Las Vegas Strip, okay? I'm talking all the way from Fremont Street all the way past Mandalay Bay. I drove the whole Strip, all the way from the north end to the south end, okay? And I can tell you what I saw. What I saw was craziness, okay? It's the Las Vegas Strip. No, but in all seriousness, as busy as I've ever seen it. As busy as I've ever seen it on the Strip. I mean, it was jam-packed. You hear all this talk about recession. Oh, people have no money. No. I can tell you, people still got money, okay? I don't know where it comes from, but people got plenty, and I mean plenty of money. That Strip was packed. I would imagine most of the hotels' occupancy was pretty close to max. And we have a very interesting dynamic going on, okay? So Michigan consumer sentiment here has continued to improve from where it bottomed back in the summer. Now, the issue I have is we had a recession. We had a recession back around summertime of 2022. The government didn't call it a recession, but it was a recession. Let's be very clear about that. The only thing you didn't get in that recession was unemployment. Unemployment was low. It was under 4%. So therefore, the government decided not to call it a recession, even though every other indicator you could look at was basically screaming recession, right? Including consumer sentiment, which who buys all the stuff? Oh, it's consumers. So if consumers are telling you it's bad, it's probably bad, right? And nonetheless, the consumer sentiment was the lowest we've ever seen it in the history of the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Survey. The lowest, okay? Like, we've never seen it that bad. That's how bad it got, right? And so if consumers are telling you that it's that bad, right? Literally the worst ever. Likely you're in a recessionary scenario, but they chose not to call it a recession. And I think this is a big problem we have in the market now at this point in time, that because we didn't call it a recession, if we would have just called it a recession and then said, oh, now we got out of the recession, we could have moved on. But because they chose not to call it a recession for whatever reason, okay, and you can draw your own conclusions there, they chose not to call it a recession. Now we just have to keep hearing about, oh, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, instead of just being like, oh, we are in the recession, we recovered from the recession, now we're on the upward trend, right? The good thing about, obviously the 08-09 situation is they called it an actual recession, right? They called it a recession, it got dedicated as a recession. They didn't say, well, this segment over here isn't facing a recession, so therefore we're not going to call it a recession. They looked at it and they said, hey, this fits recession, this is recession, okay? And so nonetheless, folks, I think that's very important, because now you got consumers basically feeling better and better and better out there, which makes getting in an actual recession a harder thing, right? What you're looking at is basically what could be referred to as real wages, okay? And what we actually witnessed was, guess what? When the recession was going on, when we actually had a recession, but they chose not to call it a recession because one data point wasn't recessionary, so they're like, oh, since that one thing isn't, we're not going to call it a recession. What did we see? Real wages dropped the most significant we've almost ever seen real wages drop. I mean, that was an insane drop there in a 2-year span, right? Bottoming out in Q2 of 2022 when a recession was going on, but the government chose not to call it a recession, right? Since then, real wages have started to improve. I don't think that's going to stop. I think real wages are going to continue to improve quarter after quarter after quarter for potentially at least the next year, if not several years to go in the future. When real wages of folks keep going down and down and down, that's a recession, right? Just because one data point is not lining up to your criteria of recession does not mean you're not in a recession, okay? If consumers are telling you it's the worst they've ever seen it, and if real wages are declining at a rapid clip like that, right? That's a damn recession. I hate to break it to people. That's a freaking recession, okay? Foot Locker, value stock. Plain and simple. It's a dividend value stock, right? Plain and simple. Usually PE is trading around 10-ish, right? Very cheap stock. If you're wondering with that disappointing guide for 2023, wasn't that stock down more than 5% today? The reason that stock wasn't down more than 5% is the stock already trades incredibly cheap, right? It wasn't like this was some high flyer going into those earnings. And so nonetheless, I look at Foot Locker. It is a position I want to continue to add here. Now, we're going to take this a step deeper because there's some other interesting things that happen here, but just my general opinion on this is I still have full belief in this company. 2023, not an exciting year. Foot Locker's to close 400 mall stores as it shifts to niche shops. In my opinion, in regards to this, I think this is one of those things, like, if you think about mall traffic over the next 5 years, right? Some malls are going to do really well, right? And some malls are just going to continue to fall off and do worse and worse over this next 5 years, right? And so it makes sense that Foot Locker is going to close some of those mall stores and go ahead and redeploy those assets in other places. That makes sense there. But there's something more interesting here, and it starts here, okay? Foot Locker touts renewed Nike relationship. Okay, look at this here, folks, okay? Foot Locker CEO Mary Dillon touted a renewed and revitalized relationship with Nike, including an emphasis on sneaker culture. Okay, this is intriguing. Nike had moved away from its wholesale relationships so it could build out its direct-to-consumer channels, but ended up with a glutton inventory, right? Now, you know what I thought when I read that? First off, I thought that was great news. When I heard Nike was going to try to move away from Foot Locker, immediately I knew that was going to be bad. And I knew it was going to be bad for both companies. It hurt both. I'm like, this is so... I don't want to say stupid. That's just sounds, not politically correct. It was such a bad decision. I'll put it like that. Such a poor decision. I remember, I don't know if that was 2 years ago I heard about that or whatever. And as somebody that's a Foot Locker owner of their stock, right, or if it was a year ago, 2 years ago, obviously I wasn't happy with it from the Foot Locker side because Nike is such an important customer of theirs. It's the most important customer, right? But I looked at it from even Nike's perspective. I was like, that's a bad move. like they need to be partnering with Foot Locker as much as possible. Like Foot Locker does a great job of branding in their stores, of highlighting products, of doing a great job of merchandising. I was like, that is such a bad decision from Nike. And what this tells me Nike is not in a great place right now, okay? Because at the end of the day, if everything was going great for Nike, right, why would they be interested in renewing their relationship more with Foot Locker now at this point in time? Think about that for a moment, right? If everything was amazing for Nike, they would have been like, we don't care, well, this is the right decision. But when you start backtracking, and then you know, in a matter of a year or two, you go from, we don't want to work with you as much, to all of a sudden, no, actually, let's get back together. That likely means something's going wrong, right? It's like in a relationship. Let's picture, a boyfriend breaks up with a girlfriend or vice versa, right? And then they come running back to that person a few months later or a year later. It's likely because they didn't find somebody better than you. Let's just call it what it is, right? And that feels like this in this Nike situation here. And so, I don't know, I'm not going to obviously place any short-term moves on this, but I do have to think, I wonder if bad earnings are coming for Nike or a bad guide is coming or something like that. Because like I said, for them to all of a sudden be like, oh yeah, let's build our relationship further now, Foot Locker, that's a big change there. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens here. But between Foot Locker's guide, between Foot Locker saying they got a renewed relationship here with Nike moving forward, and kind of putting all those pieces together, right? I do have to wonder if Nike has bad earnings coming or guidance coming. We'll know within 24 hours from now because they report earnings within the next 24 hours, and we'll find out. We'll find out, folks. That should be interesting, right?